will help us. What we're hoping is that the monitoring and evaluation method will help us to develop logic models on how we intend to make a real impact in this work going forward. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Siyaphumelela from CESA, who will chair the workshop. Siyaphumelela, are you with us? You're on mute there, Siyaphumelela.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning. Morning.
Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Lovely. How is everyone doing this morning? I trust you're well, everyone, and you're ready.
We are very well. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, nice. My name is Siyaphumelela. I'm going to quickly, before I get into today's work, I'm going to quickly show you what the day will look like. Let me pull out the outline for the workshop. Okay, so we're going to be here for about 4 hours, I believe. We have the introduction by Kevin already. I'm going to give you an introduction to today's workshop, what you should expect. Essentially, we're going to have two parts, two lectures. The first part is going to be between 9:15 and 10:15, 15 past 9 and 15 past 10. And then there will be a breakaway session where we'll send you into different groups to work with colleagues and other participants. And you then feedback to this plenary. And after that, we'll have a short tea break. And after the tea break, we'll have part 2, where we go into another lecture. And then we have another breakaway session again before we invite Kevin or Tabang or someone else to wrap up the day. So let me share the introduction so that you can have a clue what we are covering today.
Primo, this is Fezile.
Yes, Fezile.
While you do that, can I just give them a background of how this M&E came about?
Okay.
Yeah. So, colleagues, this is Fezile from Wits. A few years ago, I hope you can see me. I've switched on my camera. A few years ago, Wits had the CHE institutional audit. And during that audit, the panel made a few observations about Wits and where we are. And one of those observations were that Wits has many very important projects that aim to support students academically, as well as to equip them with life skills. And those were very important and necessary. However, these projects didn't seem to translate into success, at least academically. So when we were looking at our stats, these programs didn't really look to be helping to move the needle in terms of student outcomes academically. So we decided to at least look into establishing an M&E culture at Wits. So everybody that is running some kind of project should look at it through an M&E lens, and there should be M&E taking place before the project starts and continuously as the project progresses, so that even the project managers and coordinators themselves are able to monitor themselves, whether they are able to meet the goals that they set out to meet when they started the project. And I think that there are a lot of projects in our institutions that we think work, but we haven't really produced evidence that shows that they're actually intervening as they were intended, or having the impact that they were intended to have. So this M&E project is an ongoing project. It's the main focus of our Siyaphumelela 3. And it's an attempt to align some of the excellent work that is happening centrally in departments and faculties at Wits with the overall indicators that we use at Wits to measure student success institutionally. So we ourselves don't have expertise in M&E. So we contracted some experts, and that is Brimo's team, to help us think through what a framework would look like. I think that is very useful as a first step, and it was quite good that we got somebody that was external to help us develop some kind of framework that we can then use to sort of implement what we were thinking in terms of M&E. So I think today what Brimo will be doing is just talking through the process that Wits used to develop the M&E framework, some considerations, as well as the interactions that we had between key staff members that are important role players in terms of running the project, and what their role was when we were developing this M&E. Thank you. Brimo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Fezile. Yeah. Okay. Please feel free to leave me a comment in the chat box if you have a question, or if you want to drop a comment. All right. So let me share what we will be covering today to prepare you. Right. I will be checking the chat now and then. All right. So as a way of introduction, I have prepared 3 slides just for you to see what we are covering today at this workshop. The purpose of the workshop is really fourfold, although if you look at it, it's twofold really. First of all, we will be covering a few basic concepts in monitoring and evaluation, so that when we start talking about what we did for Wits and showing you the results, you can follow. It's a workshop and not a seminar. So we will be asking you to do a few things yourself in the workshop. So that's really the first part 1. And part 2 is then using the Wits institutional framework for student success, which Fezile has talked about just now. It's a mouthful, as you can see. We use that as a case study to demonstrate what Caesar did with or for Wits University. While we do that, we thought it would be important to discuss the value of having a university-wide M&E plan like Wits has done. There are not many universities on the continent that have undertaken a similar project in terms of having a university-wide M&E plan. And of course, while showcasing this case study, we will be describing the detailed and systematic approach that we applied to developing the M&E plan. So essentially, the learning outcomes is for you to understand, everyone here will understand what M&E is. M&E is one of those terminologies, or perhaps there are 2 terminologies there, monitoring and evaluation, that are thrown around by different professionals and used in different contexts. People are not often sure what they mean, and people sometimes even get the wrong end of the stick. So we thought it would be important for people to go home with really what monitoring and evaluation is, and also know what the major elements of an M&E framework entails, what the major elements of an M&E framework are, and then know how to translate university interventions and activities into a logical framework. So one of the activities I'll be giving to you today in the breakaway session is to come up with an intervention for a university, something very simple, a simple intervention, and then translate that intervention into a logical framework. And of course, while we are discussing the Wits M&E system, we hope that you would also learn the key elements of an M&E system. So, like I said, the workshop is going to be in two parts. In the first part, I will cover the basic concepts, some basic concepts in monitoring and evaluation. But first of all, we need to know what M&E is, and we'll talk about what a logical framework is, and also what indicators are. Indicators are such a common term, but you'll be surprised how many people get it wrong. And then after that, we're going to part two, where the part two, which focuses on the Wits institutional framework for M&E for student success. We'll look at the M&E plan, and we'll look at why such a framework is important, why Wits thought such a framework is important. And we'll also look at what we did as part of these assignments, and we'll then look also at how we did it. So this is what we'll be covering today. I think we can get started unless there is a question. Any question, please? I doubt. So let's get started. Okay. Let's me. Sorry, struggling to end this. What's happening? Can you believe it's on my computer is frozen? Please, can you hear me? Can somebody tell me can you please tell me what you're seeing on the other side?
We can hear you.
I cannot see.
We don't see anything being shared yet, but we can hear you very clearly.
Lovely. I'm struggling to exit this slide. I'm not sure for what reason. Please just give me a second. I'm restarting my PowerPoint. Okay, sorry about that. I had to restart my PowerPoint, but we're here now. All right, so this is part one, basic concepts in monitoring and evaluation. All right, let's start by looking at the outline of what we're doing this morning. In this part one, I want us to see what monitoring is, what evaluation is, and ask ourselves whether they mean the same thing and what the objectives of each is. So what is monitoring? Monitoring essentially involves the continuous oversight of ongoing activities. Monitoring is different from evaluation, even though both are complementary. They are two very different things. And that is the first thing I would like everyone to take home today, that you can do monitoring without doing evaluation, and you can do evaluation without doing monitoring. And you can, in fact, do both and even sometimes using the same data sets. So monitoring is different from evaluation, very different, but they are complementary. Okay. So monitoring involves a continuous oversight of ongoing activities in terms of, we're talking about program activities now. Essentially, the aim of monitoring is to count what we're doing and to routinely look at the quality of what we're producing. So it's not just about, first, the primary reason for monitoring is to count, but it's not just about counting, it's also ensuring that the quality of what we are producing is good. The quality of our services, the quality of our outputs, okay? And then you might say, what is evaluation? Evaluation, as opposed to monitoring, is systematic, and it's an assessment of different elements of a project, program, or policy, essentially to determine the merit or the worth of that program. The elements that you can look at, when people think about evaluation, what is very common is impact evaluation. Many people know about impact evaluation, but impact evaluation is just one of the examples or one of the types of evaluations there are. You can do you can do a formative evaluation, you can do a baseline evaluation, you can do a process evaluation, you can do a design evaluation. So there are different kinds of evaluation you can do, but essentially, at different stages of the pipeline or the timeline of a program or a project, imagine that if you were doing an evaluation before a program starts, you could be doing a formative evaluation to inform the design of that program. But if you're doing an evaluation in the middle of a program, you could be doing a process evaluation to determine the implementation and the efficiency of that program or project, right? And if you're doing an outcome evaluation or an impact evaluation, usually you do those after the program has been running for a while, a few months, a few years, depending on the kind of program. You do an outcome or an impact evaluation after the program has been running for a while to determine if the lives of the beneficiaries are being changed or not. And so you can, what really matters here is that evaluation is more systematic and more objective than just counting, which is monitoring. And you might remember that you cannot define the word research without using the word systematic. We cannot define research without using systematic. And so that really tells us that you cannot do an evaluation without using research methodology or research methods. So you do need, evaluation is essentially the application of research for program, the application of research in programs or projects is essentially what evaluation is. So evaluation uses research methods. We define research as a systematic inquiry into nature in order to answer a question or solve a problem, right? So that's systematic collection of data, systematic analysis of data, and interpretation of data in order to determine whether a program is meeting its promise, is achieving its promise, its merit, its worth, is what we call evaluation. So the aim of evaluation is to determine, is to help us determine the worth of an intervention, whether we should continue doing it or not. So in a nutshell, on this slide, I summarize by saying monitoring is the routine process of data collection to provide information about progress towards targets. This is why we set targets in M&E framework or M&E documents, so that the people working in a program can count can routinely follow what they are doing to determine whether they are meeting their targets. In a way, almost anyone with a basic degree can do monitoring. You know, you count what you're achieving and plot against the targets and see whether you are meeting the targets that have been set. It's very routine. It's essentially counting. Most of the statistics we use in monitoring are numbers, a simple counts. You know, 20 students have received a meal today, this month, and last month it was 15 students who received a meal, and so on and so forth. But evaluation, on the other hand, would require higher level expertise because, first of all, you have to be a researcher, but on the other hand, you have to be a researcher who can apply research methods to evaluation. So you have to know different kinds of evaluation designs, from non-experimental to quasi-experimental, and even the experimental. So evaluation is really the use of research methods to systematically assess a project's design, implementation, and results. I should make clear, I think I've said it before, that not all evaluations do all three. In fact, it's usually not recommended for one evaluation to do all three. Perhaps it's not even possible. It's usually recommended to have different evaluations. This is why you hear about process evaluation, outcome evaluation, baseline evaluation, impact evaluation. But sometimes you can put in more than one into one terms of reference or scope of work. You can say we're doing process and outcome evaluation, but you cannot be doing a baseline evaluation at the same time doing an outcome evaluation. As the name implies, one has to happen before the project and the other has to happen after the project has at least gained some momentum, after the project has started to some extent, right? So I hope that's clear, but if it isn't, let's continue. There's another slide I have for you here. I put here 8 differences between monitoring and evaluation, and I will also try and bring in some similarities as well. Okay, so the first difference is when do you do monitoring? You do monitoring from the time the project starts. You do monitoring from the time the project starts. You're counting what you're doing, you know. But you can do an evaluation before a project starts. Like I've talked about formative evaluation. That's the kind of evaluation you do to inform your program, so that your program will have results. Because one of the errors, I'm not going into program design, but if you work in the field of M&E, you would need to know something about program design, you know. But one of the errors that many programs do is that they do not do formative assessment, formative evaluation. They think that this intervention will benefit the students, and then they put the intervention on the students. But some formative evaluation can be helpful, some context. While an intervention may look good on paper or may have worked elsewhere in a different context, it's often important to hear from potential beneficiaries, and you know, on what they think the problems really are, or not problems, what they think their needs really are, and how they think they will be able to use the needs. You know, we can ask them, do you think you would use this if we brought something like this to this school, or if an intervention like this was in place, would you use it? What time of the day would you want to access it? You know, those kind of information can be very important for forming or designing a successful program. So I've digressed there to tell you about formative evaluation, and to buttress the point that an evaluation can happen even before a program is designed. And that's formative. Do not confuse it for baseline evaluation. a baseline evaluation happens before the program is implemented, so that you can measure what was before the program, and so that when you come back to measure what is, you can have a pre and post comparison. So essentially, an evaluation can be done, monitoring has to be done throughout the program, but only when the program has started. But an evaluation can be done at any time. I like to use these two terminologies to differentiate between monitoring and evaluation. One is continuous and the other is continual. A few years ago, I stumbled into the difference between both. The continuous is, it's something that continues without stopping, and continual is something that's intermittent, as it were. So you can have a baseline evaluation and then come back and have a mid-term evaluation, come back and have an end-term evaluation. Evaluations are expensive. They don't happen every day. Why do we do monitoring? We do monitoring to track program performance against targets, and we do evaluation to determine if we should be doing this program at all, if we should be spending this kind of money. Is the program delivering on its promises? In which area, where do we do monitoring? You only do monitoring where the program is being implemented. Monitoring is like CCTV. You only monitor where the program is and not elsewhere. So, but evaluation, sometimes when we collect data in evaluation, we collect data in the areas where the program is being implemented, but also in control areas, what we call comparison. There's a slight difference between both anyway. In control areas where the program is not being implemented because of the science of evaluation, you might want to do that comparison between program and control areas. But for monitoring, you're obviously just monitoring the program area. And then the question that monitoring seeks to answer is, are we doing things right? Are we doing things right? Are we hitting our target? Why are we not hitting our target? Are we doing things right? Do we have issues of efficiency? Have we employed enough people? Do we have the resources to meet these targets? Have we accepted targets that we cannot meet? Or are we not using the resources we've been given correctly? So that's really the question of efficiency. It's a question of process. But evaluation is answering the question of, are we doing the right thing in the first place? So are we doing the right thing? So should we continue with this intervention? Is it worth it? Then in terms of tools, as you can imagine, I've said this before, the tools for evaluation, for monitoring, really simple. And maybe I could even say you don't need a degree to count. If you're doing an intervention, running workshops for students, maybe you can have someone who has a matric to take a register and count and plot graphs, if they know how to plot graphs every month. But I'm just trying to say how simple it is. It's not that simple. You do need an M&E officer. Yeah, but I'm just trying to draw a line of difference between both in terms of simplicity. But evaluation, it can be more complex. You need to know what you're doing. You need to design your research in a way that can answer the questions. And as you can see on line 6, drawing from the simplicity of line 5, we just, for monitoring, we use records and registers to determine what we've achieved and what we haven't. And for the other one, we need surveys. And also, as you can imagine, monitoring can be done internally, and it should be done internally, not can be. It should be done internally. But evaluation, people often consider that you need to be unbiased. So, I mean, you can have an internal evaluation or an external evaluation, or even a mix of both. There are pros and cons to both. I mean, the pros will be that if you use somebody who works on the program to do an evaluation of that program, the person knows the nitty-gritty. But I guess the biggest issue is objectivity. And that's why people use external consultants often for evaluation. If you really want to be if you really want to know whether a program works, you might want to place premium on unbiased methods and results. And lastly, the focus of monitoring is what is being done, what are we doing? So when I show you the logical framework very soon, you will see that the focus on monitoring is on input and output. So for the Wits student success framework, you'll see that the different units running their programs and interventions are responsible for monitoring. They have to count, they have to take records and submit those records to a central unit. But when it comes to evaluation to see whether the lives of students are being changed, then that's the focus of evaluation. The focus is on the outcomes and impact. This may not be obvious to everyone at the moment. I know some of you are experts at this, but evaluation would focus more on outcomes and impact. They're complementary. They both require data. They both use indicators, and sometimes they use the same indicators. And they both use data to produce actionable information, strategic information. We'll talk about this a bit more in the next session. And both can produce or can use quantitative and qualitative data. They both definitely require an M&E framework, and they're complementary. Again, I think I will explain more on this in the next part, in part 2. But it's important for me to say to just show this slide at this moment. The reason we do M&E is to strengthen the design and implementation of programs. Just looking at the amount of data that is currently in the world last week, and how different organizations are generating data, the amount of data that's being generated daily, and how the units of measuring data keeps changing. We're now using zettabytes, 10 raised to the power 27, because the amount of data in the world is just humongous. It's massive. Data is the new gold. Data is the new oil. And unfortunately, Africa is still behind in the use of data for decision making. And many universities are behind. People do interventions for the good of it. It's great. Sometimes people do interventions to tick boxes, and sometimes people do interventions to satisfy their conscience and feel good. But data should drive the direction and extent of interventions. And unfortunately, Africa is still behind. Many businesses, universities, and especially governments are not using data in the way they should be using in this century, in this time. So we need to use data to justify the use of resources. We shouldn't be afraid to scrap programs that are not working. We shouldn't be afraid to modify programs that are not working. We shouldn't be afraid to allow data speak to us and provide directions where we should be going. So we should be collecting as much data as we can. And that's the good thing that Wits has done with this Wits institutional framework for student success M&E plan. Because if we do not celebrate success, we are likely celebrating failure or mediocrity, and doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So these are the different reasons why we do M&E, and at the center of that is allowing data to be the advocate, allowing data to speak on what we should do, how we should do it, and where we should be going. This is just similar to what I have on the other side. And if we cannot see success, how can we reward it? And if we cannot reward success, we're probably rewarding failure. That's from Asbon and Gabler. So I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box what you have learned so far. Thank you. I will be going into the chat to see very quickly. Feel free to type. Let's make it interactive. It's a two-way street. I'd like to hear from you what you have learned so far. Perfectly okay if you repeat what somebody has written, and maybe you can also be a bit descriptive and say, I have learned that M&E means this, monitoring means this, and evaluation means that. I have 3 to 5 minutes to formative evaluation is important for the success of the project. Thank you, Potson. That's absolutely true. We use data to guide our actions. That's true. Emelina, to consider the different types of evaluation depending on where you are in the process. That's true, Christina. And the difference from Lorica, the difference between monitoring and evaluation, amazing. A different perspective on the difference between monitoring and evaluation. Yeah, thank you, Likao. I really like to drill that. That's why I've created that table of 8 differences, because many people just mix them up. A significant insight for me is that the two are not necessarily a package, depending on what you're needing to do. Absolutely correct, Vishna. And the distinction between M&E and power data to talk from different perspectives. Yeah, we should allow the data to talk to us, and we should take this to our different universities. Organizations in Africa are not using data enough. We haven't even started to use data in comparison to North America and the Northern Hemisphere. Monitoring as a continuous process while evaluation is episodic. Amazing. Sounds like a medical doctor, Oliver. You don't need to do M&E together. It can be done separately, absolutely. What monitoring and evaluation is, even though M&E can be done together, they're both different. Monitoring is done more in a project, evaluation at the end of the project. Yeah, evaluation can even be done at the beginning, even before a project, at any time. Monitoring during a project. Clarity on the difference between the two concepts is valuable. Thank you, Brian, for explaining the difference between M&E for student success. I've learned that data points. Okay, I'll stop reading now. Thank you for the interaction. Yeah. All right, we can continue. Thank you. I'll come back here soon. All right, I'm now going into something not introductory, something a bit technical, but I know you all follow. This is really the meat of monitoring and evaluation, the fulcrum of monitoring and evaluation, the skeleton, the M&E framework. I may not go into detail in the M&E framework in this session, but at least I'll go into a ontological framework. I mean, the first thing that one may want to ask is, what is a framework, isn't it? And then we'll ask ourselves, what is an M&E framework? It's a terminology that many people use, again, very, very popular, and then we then ask ourselves, what are the key elements of an M&E framework, right? And we can probably try to design a simple framework together, right? So we can ask ourselves and say, I could ask you now and say, what is a framework? If a framework is essentially a model. It's like when people come into our statistics class, And we say we're doing modeling, we're doing linear regression models and logistic regression models. They think it's something so complicated. But I think it's a light bulb moment to say a model is an equation. It's an equation. A model is an equation. Y is equal to A plus BX or BC. The linear model is an equation on what we think. An equation that we think explains the relationship between variables. So in the same vein, a model is really just a basic structure. It's a basic structure upon which you build a system. It's like a skeleton, like I said. A model is the basic structure upon which you then build other things. So, and that model is what we call a framework. Sorry, a model is an equation, but a framework is a basic structure, but they're more or less the same thing. A framework is a basic structure, Somebody might want to sell you a car that's damaged or a house that, they say it has a basic structure, it has a basic framework, and you can then build on that, right? So a framework is really the basics, the underlying structure for any system, the underlying structure for any system. So let's look at what a framework is. This is an example that I like to use. So Tandeka is a university student who was born into a poor home. Her family have lived in rented apartments since she was born, and things have been very difficult for them. She believes that if she gets a degree, life will become much better for the family. And in trying to get the family to believe in her, let's assume they are in this quarter camp and they have moved from one place to another and they're in dire straits and things are really tough. So she's trying to convince this family. She's saying, Mom, let me explain my logic to you. And Mom says, how can you make things better for us? We are poor. And she says, let me explain my logic to you. She then creates a simple conceptual framework. She creates a logic model, a diagram to explain her thinking to her mother, right? So this is Tandeka's conceptual framework. For those who have done masters or PhDs that involved the use of conceptual framework, they get it. In research, we call it conceptual framework. In monitoring and evaluation, we call it M&E framework. All right, it's really a diagram that shows linkages, relationships between events, between outputs or outcomes. So Tandeka puts this together because sometimes to jump from where you are to the end is really difficult. And they say to eat an elephant, you start by eating one piece at a time. So if the mother thought Tandeka was crazy, by breaking it down now, maybe the mother can begin to listen and believe and have some faith as well. And she says, instead of just saying, Mom, I'm going to make things better for us, she says, Mom, I'm going to study very hard, or I'm going to study, and then I'll get a degree. And after getting a degree, I'm going to get a job. And after getting a job, I'm going to improve our lives to get better, right? So this is Tandeka's logic model. Number one, it's a logic. Number two, it's a model. It's a basic equation, a basic expression, at least, of how she thinks she can get from A to D. Whether you believe her or not, whether it will happen or not, is secondary. The primary thing is for us to understand what she's saying. And she says, I'll study, and then I will get a degree and I will get a job and things will be better for the family. Okay. So we can ask ourselves and say, what is Tandeka trying to solve? What problem is Tandeka trying to solve? You know, Tandeka is trying to solve, I could ask you to put in the chat box, but let me do this because of time. Tandeka is trying to solve the problem of poverty, the hardship in their family. Do you agree with Tandeka's logic model? If I ask you to vote in this class, maybe half of you or more than half will say, yeah, I agree. That's the path I took myself. You know, I studied hard, I got a degree, got education, got a job, and slowly but surely, things are getting better for my mom or family. But then there are assumptions that have to be made. So what assumptions do you think she made for her to have this beautiful picture of the future? I mean, one assumption is that she assumes she's going to graduate. She assumes she will not be financially or academically excluded. She assumes that once she gets a degree, she will find a job, that the jobs are out there. And she also assumes that when you have a job, life will get better. Well, are those assumptions reasonable? I believe they are. I believe they are. And then we can also ask ourselves, how long do you think the process will take? You know, so when you run an intervention, you have to ask yourself, how long do you think this process will take? If we want to build the literacy skills of the students in our university, or first-year students, how long, and we have an intervention in mind, how long do we think it would take for this intervention to start producing results? If there's if there are mental health issues among students, and we bring in different interventions in place, it's important to also ask ourselves, how long do we think the process will take, and what resources do we think we need, or Tandeka need in this case? Let's express Tandeka's logic model in a slightly different way. So these are the key elements of a logic model. You know, these are the key elements of a logic model. A logic model, I'm calling it a logic model here, just to make it easy for you. A logic model is the same thing as a logical framework. Okay, so the activities, studying is what we call activities, the things you do every day, you know, the micro things you do. Not all M&E plans include those because they can be very granular. Well, the department involved should measure those things, should have a record of those things, but they might not make it to the M&E plan. Let me not get ahead of myself. Let me stay on Tandeka for a while. Let me stay on Tandeka. So Tandeka says, I'm going to study, and that's my activity every day. And then as a result of my studying, I'm going to have an output, which is a degree. And the degree, you know, I'm going to have that output. And then I'm going to get a job. You know, getting a job is when I really start to benefit from the output. The output, getting a job starts to change my life. And that's the outcome. And by getting a job, I can eventually, in the process of time, achieve my goal to have a better life for the family. What is a logical framework? Or you know, what's a logical framework? So this thing I've called a logic model, we can also call it a logical framework. And in fact, we'll call it a logical framework from now. And then in part 2, I will show you the M&E framework. So it's a logical framework and then M&E framework. Logical framework, M&E framework. The M&E framework is just a little more detailed than the logical framework. The M&E framework is an extension of the logical framework. But if you understand the logical framework, you already understand the M&E framework. So the logical framework is really about the program logic that explains how the objective of the program is to be achieved, right? There is this phrase I do not want to overflow because of time, developmental objective or development objective. Development objective is the reason for every program. How do you think you will achieve your development objective? That is what the logical framework shows. What process will you follow to achieve your development objective? Development is the change in people. That is what we call development, the change in people, right? And the objective, development objective, usually aligns with the outcome in a logical framework. So the logical framework is explaining how the development objective is to be achieved, and by doing so, including causal relationships and underlying assumptions. They have to be relationships and assumptions. Okay. It is hierarchical. It's the logical framework is hierarchical, as you have already seen. You go from low level to high level. It's a hierarchical description of a program from its operations to the desired impact. Gone are the days where we just did things for good and we only focused on the operations. That's traditional M&E, traditional M&E. You say, oh, there is a woman there in my community who has a crash, and we give her money, and she brings these children together, she feeds them, and she can report on the number of children she's fed, and the number of meals, the number of, we can even be very pedestrian and go down, number of bags of food stuff she's bought, and so on and so forth. But in results-based M&E, we say, hey, we are a bit interested in those operations of the number of children fed and number of meals. Do that, we're interested. But we want you to draw a linkage between that and our desired impact. Our desired impact may be nutritional, the weight of the child, the height of the children, the weight of the children, or it may be academic performance. This is why we gave you this money to do this good. So we'll be coming back while we are measuring what you're doing at the program level. We'll also be measuring what is happening at the development level. The development level is the changes we are seeing in the lives of those children. We want to see those changes. We will not just give you money for bags of rice and pasta and mealie meal. And yeah, you can monitor those, but we want to see the development in those children. We have some development objectives. And what are the development objectives? Maybe academic, health, you know, and so on and so forth. We'll come back to measure those. So today, we have moved away from traditional M&E to results-based M&E, results-based. You have to show us results from the operations you're doing to the impact you hypothesized. You know, often for universities, the impact is to have students achieve academic success. And how we define academic success can vary from one school to another, you know, but we will have a few indicators to measure academic success. That will be our goal. Or we can even go a bit further to say they become gainfully employed after they get a degree. So I'm just highlighting the concepts of results-based framework. First of all, I hope we all get it, that the framework is hierarchical. It shows different levels of results. Maybe I should come back to this slide after the next diagram. Okay. So you use a logical framework for planning, management, and M&E. In fact, the logical framework was developed by the military. It wasn't developed by academic people. It was developed by the military for management. And anyone can use this, the M&E framework, the logical framework for management and for planning. It helps us to identify short-term goals and long-term goals, making clear how activities relate to output and how they lead to outcomes and impact. I think I should show you the diagram for those of you who haven't seen it before. So if we put it in a diagram, this is what it looks like. Okay, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. We put it in a diagram, but often we put it in a table, and then we call it a log frame. Okay, so I should wrap up in 5-10 minutes, I believe. So we have here inputs, and we have here activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. You will get the slides after the workshop. I will explain this twice because it's not always easy for people to know, especially the differences between neighboring results. Input, very easy. Input, very easy. Money and people. If you like, you can add time. It's usually financial and human resources. How detailed? If I ask you to send me your M&E plan, you can include input. How detailed you want to go is up to you. If you want to tell me it's $10 million, and that's okay. But if you want to say we bought 10 vehicles, 20 laptops, at the end of the day, it boils down to money and people. You might have the money and not have the expertise. So we like to say money and people. Money will buy the materials and the other resources. So these are the resources you pour into the program, right? And the activities and the actions taken through which inputs are converted to outputs. So if you think about cooking, you need some inputs, right? You need some groceries. You need money to buy the groceries, input. And the activities, going to the mall to shop, depends on how detailed you want to be, boiling water, boiling the meat, cooking, and none of those is an output yet. They're all activities. Shopping, driving, shopping, cooking, whatever you're doing, they're all activities. They end in ing. Activities usually end in ing. And hopefully those activities will translate into food. The food you have cooked, which you put on the dining table, is the output from those activities. The food is the output. So if you gave me food twice today, I can say I've eaten the output. If we have to count the output, we say 2 meals. All of the activities that led to the output, I may not be interested because they are too detailed. It might be 1 million of them. But I want to know what you did today, this week, and or this month. Then comes outcomes. Outcomes, you see, by the time you get to output, from input to output is a program or project, okay? From input to output is a program or project. From outcome to impact are the beneficiaries, the developmental objectives, the lives you are changing. So you cannot just say, I served 1,000 meals. Okay, all well and good. Can we see the outcomes in the lives of the students? What's the objective for feeding these students? You say, how how do we measure outcomes? What was the objective? So we want to have food security. We don't want people to be hungry. We want people to eat 3 times daily and have, food security on campus. That's our outcome. We can even have other outcomes. We want people, we can even link it to, we can say we're measuring their weight, BMI. We don't want people to be malnourished or obese. Yeah, so we can have those outcomes. Those are the lives we are changing, the people we are changing. But why are you hoping to achieve food security on campus? It's really because we're interested in academic success, in student success. That's the impact. That's the goal. The overall goal. Objective is different from goal. Objective is outcome, and goal is impact. Okay, let me not overflog that. I'm sure you get it through the next activity. So I repeat myself here because I'm going to give you an activity on this. Input the resources you need, activities, the running around you do, what we do, that's activities. And outputs are deliverables, what we deliver. So you think of that, it's what we do, and here is what we produce or deliver. So these are really easy. Activities and outputs are really easy. When you're building, if you ask me to build an M&E framework for a woman who is running a creche, I will include inputs, activities, and outputs. I will include all 5. But if you ask me to build a university-wide M&E framework, I'll go crazy. The university will go crazy if I include activities. We'll probably have 1,000 or 2,000 lines. If the country says, Brimo, build us an M&E plan for our health system, it will be nonsensical for me to include activities. So what you include in your M&E plan depends on the scale of the project or the scale of the program, the scope of work, what you're covering. So for the Wits M&E plan, we started from outputs. And of course, we did have outcomes and impacts. Outcomes are the medium-term results for specific beneficiaries that are the consequence of the outputs. So because the students are eating well, there's now food security on campus because you're providing food. You're providing food. There's now food security on campus. You just sit there in the food department, making the food, delivering the food. You are delivering, let's say, 10,000 meals a month or a year. That's great. Those are outputs. But we can do a survey among students to measure the extent of food security. We can do a survey among students to determine the percentage of students who went to bed without food. Yesterday, a day prior to the survey, or the percentage of students who think that not having food has impacted their academic performance. So we can measure outcomes like that through a survey. And impact, of course, if they're not eating well, it will impact on academic performance. So impact are the lives we change, and they're usually in the areas of health, education, economics. They are longer term than outcomes, which are medium term. If you increase policing on campus or security on campus, that output, the number of police or security men you have on campus is output. And how safe students feel to go around the library at any time of the day on campus is outcome. That safety, that feeling is the development in the student, the change, the lives you're changing. You're making them feel at home. And the impact is how that feeling and safety, that feeling of safety translates to the real reason for doing this, which is student success. So in a nutshell, it's really often a funnel. Like I said earlier, activities will be more than output. Obviously, you have to shop, you have to cook, you have to do a few things just to produce one meal. Okay, how many outputs do we have? One meal for today. How many activities? Maybe 10. And often you need a few outputs to produce fewer outcomes. And all of this then leads to one or two impacts that we're really trying to achieve. In this case, student success. For the Wits student success framework, we included measures of student success, but we also included employability. That these people have learned enough that they can get jobs when they graduate. But that can be debated whether you want to include employability. You see why now. Look at column 1, 2, and 3. Those are the sphere. Those are we call those your sphere of control. Those are your sphere of control. You can absolutely determine how many meals you produce in a day. You can determine that, of course, within the within the limits of your resources. And then the next area is your sphere of indirect influence. You cannot directly influence the weight of a student, whether it's obesity or, you cannot directly do that. You are hoping that your intervention, your output will do that. So this is the developmental objective, and this is the developmental goal. And then from this sphere of direct influence, you then go to a sphere of indirect influence. Well, you may do your part. You give them food, and there's food security on campus, but there are no textbooks. There are no textbooks. There are no lecturers. The lecturers are not showing up in class on time. The lecturers are not qualified. The students are partying. They don't want to study. The more distal the result level is, the less your influence and control. So we say that's a sphere of indirect influence. There are many other factors that affect that. And if you talk about employability, the economy of the country will affect how quickly your graduates get a job. Chat box, please. What have you learned so far? I think I need another 10 minutes. But meanwhile, let's go to the chat box. And you can also ask a question. Okay, we do not have a lot of feedback from this section. Okay, it's increasing better. Logical framework is like a guide or roadmap that shows how things link towards the goal. Amazing stuff. That's exactly what it is, but so how they link towards the goal. Thank you so much for that. And I think we should make this feedback available to participants as well. We can copy and paste in a Word document. Something like this, it's a good summary. The logical framework is like a guide or a roadmap that shows how things are linked towards the goal. Clarity on the steps from input to impact. That's exactly what she said. How events are linked together, absolutely. A process to map your thinking, management, and planning, on how to achieve your overarching goal. Stuff. The meaning and purpose of a framework, clarity on what is control, what is under one's control and what is not. Thank you, Constance. It's the end, clarity on outcome and impact. Impact measured by people's well-being or improvement in people's lives. Impact is goal. Outcome is objective. If in research, we say aim and objective. In M&E, we say goal and objectives. Goal and objective. If you know aim and objectives in research, it will be easier for you to know goals and objectives in monitoring and evaluation. Different spheres of influence, control, and direct. Yep, absolutely. Outcome and medium-term based, amazing stuff. I'll stop reading and engage. I like the sphere of influence. Amazing stuff. Great. The student success framework is likely to be additive. Oh, yes, absolutely. Now you're going into some science now. That's what happens in evaluation. Exactly. We start talking about attribution and contribution. Rishna from New City. We start talking about attribution and contribution in evaluation. Okay, thank you very much. Let's do one or two more things. Promise I'll close in 5 minutes. I just want to talk about indicators. Stop in 5 minutes. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is indicators. As you can imagine, we have different levels of results. I have now shown you that results are not just one thing. In everyday English, we think results are the students' results. But in M&E, results are at 4 different levels. And if you put activities, there'll be 5 levels of results. I want to see your input, how much you have spent. You can even talk about burn rates and the likes. I want to see your activities. Those are your results. I want to see your output. That's really where your results start now. Really start from outputs. I want to see your outcome, and I want to see your impact. All right, I will show you my output and outcome, but how do we measure the outcome? And how do we measure the impact? What's the impact? The impact is the goal. All right, we can develop indicators for measuring impact. We can call them impact indicators. We can develop indicators for measuring outcome. We can call them outcome indicators, and so on and so forth. What is an indicator then? An indicator is really just a metric, a variable that measures one aspect of a program. It's really just a variable that measures one aspect of a program. The number of hours a student studies in a day is an indicator. The number of students who attended a seminar is an indicator. The number of students who passed an exam is an indicator. An indicator, number one, varies. It's a variable. It's a measurement. It varies. If it had no capacity to vary, then it would not be an indicator. But the second thing is it varies according to the movement within the program, according to what the program is doing. So it's a variable that measures one aspect of a program. That one is really significant. It's really significant. An indicator cannot measure two things. You cannot say the number of hours a student studies and the number of hours he sleeps. That's not an indicator. You can't combine two things. It's like when people design questionnaires, they sometimes make the mistake of asking two questions in one, and often it's unknowingly. So an indicator measures one aspect of a program. Since we have 4 result levels of a program, we can also have indicators at those different levels. Yeah, we can have indicators at those different levels. We can have input indicators. We can have output indicators, which measures what is delivered, right? So if I was a lecturer, my indicator every semester or every year could be number of students. My output indicators could be number of students that have, that I produced, the number of students that I produced, So indicator talks about what you deliver. Maybe I should stick to the example of the meals, the number of meals I produce. If I had a soup kitchen, if I was in charge of the meal, the food program at a university, the number of foods, the number of meals produced. Somebody might say, okay, let's not just do number of meals, let's do number of students served. Maybe some students can eat more than 1 meal, we don't know. But if they're equal, then we can say there's no point, it's the same thing. There's no point having both. If the number of meals is equal to number of students, then we can choose one. But if a student can eat 3 meals in a day, we may then say, let's use both. And if there is no space, if the indicators are becoming too many, which is one of the issues we faced, you can then say, it's not really about meals, it's about students. So let's just say number of students fed per week or per day. So also at the outcome level, you have indicators, and at the impact level, you also have indicators. So outcomes are, outputs are tied to deliverables, outcomes are tied to objectives, and impact indicators are tied to goals. So that is the end of part 1. I now want to send you to different breakaway rooms. And in your room, I want you to come up with a program for your university, a very short, for a university, not your university, for a university, and come up with 2 output indicators, 2 outcome indicators, and 1 impact indicator. So I'm going to repeat that. Please come up with a program in your school, in a university, a development program for a university, and okay, let me just say, design a small program for a university, and come up with, let's make it like this, 4 output indicators. I'll fix the typos, don't worry. 4 output indicators, 2 outcome indicators, and 1 impact indicator. Please take a picture of this with your cell phone, and I'll break you into your respective groups now. I'll give you 30 minutes to do that. And then we'll have a feedback session. We can have the feedback after tea. So I'll give you 30 minutes to do that. And no, I think we should have the feedback before tea. We'll come back with feedback, and then we'll break for tea. And after tea, we'll come back for part 2, which is a case study. Please take a picture of this, come up with a small program for a university. It may be a program to improve literacy. It may be a program to improve research skills. It may be a program to improve security. I've used the food example. There's no reason you can't do that. So you can come up with any program. I think you know better than me. Yeah. Yes, maybe what will also be good. Let me drop this in the chat box. I'll drop this in the chat box. Thank you, Ashton. I'll drop this presentation in the chat box so that you can, or maybe I just show it here. I'll do both. I'll do both. Okay, so let me drop this in the chat box and then do the breakaway thing. Okay, stop sharing. Where is my chat? All right, I have dropped it in the chat box, but I can also just show the slide on indicators. I can also just show the slide on indicators for those who want to take a picture of it. Okay, I think that went well. We can take a picture of this. Let's see what you come up with in the respective groups. Then we will break for tea. All right, I've given you a few minutes to take a picture of this and download the slide. I will now be sending you to your respective groups in the next minute. Please take a picture of this. I want to stop sharing. I'm creating the breakout rooms. There are 70 of us. I'll create 7 rooms, 10 people per room. One person can share their screen, Microsoft Word document. When you guys are brainstorming, that person can be typing. So the first thing to do in your breakout room is to assign a scribe who will be typing what you're deliberating on. And you might want to spend the first 15 minutes agreeing on the program you want to design. You already have many programs in your schools. You can just pick one of them. And then you start to think about the indicators. And it would even be great if you could draw a logical framework, output to outcome to impact. Okay, I'm creating 10 breakaway rooms. Oh, no, 10 per room. Great. Okay, the session starts now. Please start going to your rooms.
Hi, Primo. I think I missed my window to go.
Hi, Fezile. I can send you to any room.
Okay.
Okay. I've done so. maybe you can raise your hand. Yes, thank you, Ashton. I paused it earlier. Yes, applause, welcome, absolutely. Guys, please raise your hand and I'll call you to give your feedback. Yes, we did applaud, that's true. Can you, no feedback? Yeah, I know the time is short, that's okay. Please, can you share that document again, please?
Are you asking me to share the document?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
if you can share your screen again. Not to share the doc. Okay, yeah, share your screen. Yeah. It's just a few comments, and I do not even think it is fair for me to give you comments after a 30-minute exercise, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. You see, impact is higher than is the highest level of results. So you say academic success, I agree. The question is, how do we measure academic success? The highest level of results. So there are two comments I'm going to give on the impact. The first one is impact is the highest level of result. Sorry, I don't know if my accent is results, S-U-R-S-U-L-T. Yeah, thank you. So if impact is the highest level of results, we already have throughput, which is a measure of academic success on the outcome. And we already have pass rate as a measure of academic success on the output. So the impact is the reason you're doing this. You want to improve academic success. We all agree, no arguments. But the next question is, how do you measure academic success? The indicator...
That would be graduation rate then, for students with a non-English first language background.
Yes, you can, absolutely. Graduation rate is one of them, absolutely. But you see, throughput rate in itself is graduation. We can say it's like an event, but the actual thing is throughput rate. So throughput rate is a measure of academic success. Pass rate is a measure of academic success. And so on and so forth. That's the only feedback I wanted to give. But I really like your indicators on outcome. I really like your outcome indicators, and some of those outcome indicators can be in an academic environment. Everyone knows that the goal of most interventions is academic success for students, like you said. So the impact is really easy. We all know that the goal in an academic environment for most interventions, I wouldn't say all, for most interventions, the goal is academic success. Then you can then have different measures of academic success. For example, I could say the goal for nutrition is the health of the child. And I can say, how do you measure health? I can say diarrhea, hospitalization, respiratory illnesses, weight of the baby, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so we all know that the goal for academic success, for educational interventions is academic success, not just academic. We can say student success is beyond academic, honestly. We can say student success, right? Where people often struggle is the outcome indicator. What needs to happen in that student before we see academic success or student success? And I really like what you said. That feeling of being alienated is a big factor. That engagement is a big factor. And these things are not easy to measure. You can do a survey. Wits University have all kinds of surveys they do among students, which really helps them to find indicators for outcome, which really helps them to find outcome indicators. Yeah, so I don't want to talk more than that. I really like your outcome indicators, and usually for many educational interventions, the impact is student success. All right, thank you. One more group before we break for tea. Maybe we have 5 minutes for one more. Please stop sharing. Thank you. One more group, please, before we break for tea. Yes, Edwina?
Is it Brimo?
Yes, Brimo.
I honestly don't know where to raise my hand here because I'm not familiar with Zoom
It's
at
okay.
all. But our group
It's
managed to
under
complete
reaction, Edwina.
under
It's under
reaction.
reaction. Yeah.
Let me see.
Mm.
Is it
Oh,
raised
it's okay.
now?
You can talk now.
Okay. So yeah, if I can quickly share, ours is not as detailed as our previous presenter, but yeah.
Okay.
Can everyone?
Yeah, that was really
see my-
detailed presentation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's my screen.
You can see they
Can
had
everyone
experts in group
Okay.
7.
Group 7.
What group is this, please?
I'm not sure what's our group number.
I can check. Edwina?
Group 1.
Group
Group
1?
1.
Group 1, yeah.
Yes. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, please. You may present.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see. Please go ahead.
So our program we came up with was to provide funding for the completion of PhDs in a university. And our output indicators that we came up with was the number of students that receive funding, the students enrolled in PhD, the number of PhD graduates, the number of supervisors, the number of student peer-reviewed publications. Our outcome indicators, we basically said so. Based on the fact that we said what we want to produce is basically the increased enrollments for PhDs, the increased number of PhD graduates, the increase in the number of supervisors, as well as the increased number of PhD students with peer-reviewed publications. Impact indicators, we came up with 3. Number 1, your overall access to PhD studies in the long term, as well as the increased throughput of PhD students, and then the contribution to university research outputs, as well as your knowledge generation.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Edwina. I will also just give others 1 minute to give feedback. Please don't stop sharing.
Okay.
If there are no feedback for you, I will say a few things. Does anybody want to say anything to group 1, please? Okay, I think for the benefit of time, I will do that.
Please.
Okay. Your topic is not very easy to to convert to. I can see what's happened there. You know, you have number of graduates. Okay, maybe the first thing I should just say: try and not make your. Try and a lot of people do this. Try and not make your indicators directional.
Okay.
Your goals, what you want to see can be directional, but the indicator itself only indicates. So for example, I wouldn't say, if you look at the outcomes there, if you look at the outcome, it says increased number of PhD graduates. The indicator is number of PhD graduates. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
We don't need the increased or decreased. The analysis of the data will tell us whether the number of PhD graduates is increasing or decreasing.
Right.
So, and you're not the first. Some people make this mistake. If you say, Brimo, I need data. If you say, Brimo, do you have data on increased number of PhD graduates? I don't know what that means. Do you have data on increased number of PhD graduates? I don't have that kind of data. But if you say, do you have data on number of PhD graduates? I'll say, yes, I do. Is it increasing or decreasing? I'll say, well, it is increasing or not. So indicators shouldn't be directional. They should just indicate what the program is doing.
Okay.
Just say number of cars that pass the road, number of students that enrolled, number of lecturers, whatever. We will know whether it's increasing or not by doing the analysis.
So what we basically put in our output is basically the outcome.
You got it. That's where I was going.
All right.
That's the second feedback. You see, now that you have removed the increase, you can see that by just adding an increase, you haven't changed the indicator.
Yeah.
You haven't still the same indicator. You haven't changed it. So that's where I was going. And when if we're in a full M&E training or course, which for 3 or 5 days, I will show you how to create an M&E framework. But I think this workshop is sufficient for everyone here to appreciate what a logical framework is, and but the detail of how to create it will require a full training.
Yeah.
We have a session where we do if-then, almost like you're doing a programming language. If and then, if I study, I will get a degree. If I get a degree, then I will get a job. If I get a job, then I will. So the if-then statement is very useful for building a logical framework. Okay. And I find that it's important to start at the end and at the beginning. Yes, you can note that. What is in between can sometimes take time. For example, by just looking at your sentence here, it says funding for completion of PhDs in a university. I can already tell that your impact is completion of PhDs, because that is the reason, that is the goal, so your impact is actually very good. Throughput of PhD students, you remove the increased. Contribution to university research output, I love that, and knowledge generation to society, that's great. It's not a very easy topic, but I think those are the two feedback I have for you.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much for volunteering. All right, guys, we will break for tea now for 15 minutes. And come back for part 2. Thank you. Actually, we can stop recording. Yeah. I'll see you in 15 minutes time. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ashton. Sometimes we do forget to record. Now I want to go into part 2, where I talk about the work that we did for Wits University. If there's one thing that everyone should note, is that you shouldn't build an M&E plan or an M&E framework by yourself. Okay, you shouldn't do that by yourself. Unless it's a very small program. I shouldn't say that though. I built the M&E system for South Africa last year by myself. But this work was done by a team of 3 people, or I could even say 4. And the other colleagues are part of this meeting, I believe. They are in this meeting. So I didn't do this work alone. Even though I built the South African HIV M&E system alone, I didn't work alone. I worked with different stakeholders in different parts of the country, having multiple meetings, many consultation meetings. It was exactly the same for this one, except that this time I wasn't alone. I had my team with me, and we had multiple consultations, which is what I'll be alluding to now. And so I'm grateful to all of the team members, and grateful to Wits University that gave us the opportunity to do this work. What you see there, the WIFSS is the Wits Institutional Framework for Student Success. It's an official name, so we can change it. It's called the Wits Institutional Framework for Student Success. And sometimes we just call it the Student Success Framework, you know, just to make it easy, the Student Success Framework. But then it can become difficult because you're talking about M&E framework for the Student Success Framework. You know, so there's framework everywhere. I hope you remember, we all remember what a framework is. Before I go into this lecture, it's important for me to clarify as part of the foundation. I think it's important now so that people don't get confused. So there is something called M&E framework, okay? There's something called M&E framework. I believe everyone can see what I'm writing on my whiteboard. There is something called M&E system, okay? And there is something called M&E plan, okay? So what I did for South Africa a year or two ago was an M&E framework. They said they were happy with the framework and did not have the budget to go into a plan, but also they had a plan, I think 3 years ago or something, and they just wanted to update the framework. Okay, so they had a framework and a plan. And so this time, this is Brimo just work on the framework. We don't have the budget for the plan. In fact, the budget came from international funding. So what is an M&E framework? We've already covered that. Is the backbone of the M&Es of the whole monitoring and evaluation you're going to do. I'm going to show you the M&E framework now. It's really just what you have done already, showing how active inputs leads to activities and how that leads to outcome and impact. I called it the logical framework, remember. It's not difficult to then have an M&E framework from a logical framework. All I now need to do is to put a column for activities and data sources. And if I have targets and baseline, I can put those ones, okay? So an M&E framework is a theoretical framework behind monitoring and evaluation. We've talked about that. We've even you created logical framework, which is really more like a step before an M&E framework. Now, an M&E framework is that thinking you have in your mind, which you've documented on paper, and maybe you have it in Excel, but who is going to run with it? Who is going to do the actual M&E? We need to have people, we need to specify human resources, we need to specify data sources, we need to specify IT needs, all of those things. The flesh on the skeleton is the system, the entire M&E system. You know, so you start with a framework. Once you know what you're measuring, you can then go to a system. Okay, you go to a system. So the system, you know, you have to specify where the data will be coming from, what the data sources are like, you know, which should be. And the last but not the least is the M&E plan. Again, in research, we call this a protocol or a proposal. There's a difference between a protocol or a proposal, but let's assume they are the same. We call it, in research, we call it a protocol. Protocol is a document that shows your conceptual framework and shows your systems for the project. In a protocol, your supervisor may say, or even you might say, I want to have a conceptual framework. That's the M&E framework. And the systems is how you're going to collect the data, the materials you need, your budget, the field workers you need, the software you use for analysis, That's the system around the framework. And the document you write this thing is called a protocol or proposal. That document in M&E parlance is M&E plan. The protocol is, so do not confuse them. What we did for Wits University is an M&E plan. That is the whole journey. We went the whole way. We did not just stop at a framework. We specified data sources and handed over a document we call the M&E plan. And I'm going to take you through that document. I'll scan through it. I won't go into detail. It's a commission project, but I will scan through that document when I finish this lecture. So that is what I wanted to show you, that there is a difference between these three terms. Again, people who are new to M&E or who haven't paid attention to M&E, some of them have been in the field for a few years, but they haven't paid attention. They have used these terminologies interchangeably. So what we did for Wits University was M&E plan. And if you hear me say M&E framework, I'm sure you know what I mean. Okay, so what I really want to quickly tell you in the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes is why such a system is important, why you need an institutional framework for a university, even though it's not a common practice. Well, excellent things are not always common. And then I'll tell you what we did and how we did them. Okay. So let's start with why you would need a university-wide M&E plan. And I think I already alluded to these, honestly. I talked about the value of data. And that's where I'm going to start from again now. I just thought I should quickly differentiate between data and information. Because not everyone needs to deal with data. But I do think everyone needs information, okay? So data are, data is, or data are unprocessed facts. Data are unprocessed facts, while information is processed data. Information is processed data. Well, in our everyday conversation, we can use them interchangeably, and we all do. But I think when we write for a serious audience, we should be very aware that they are not the same thing. So if I asked everyone in this webinar to tell me their age, and the first person said, I'm 50, another one says I'm 35, 28, each of those numbers is a fact that have not been processed. That's what we call data. And for those of us who work in quantitative fields, we store our data in data sets. For those who work in quali, they don't quite use data sets as the way we do. So unprocessed facts is what we call data, okay? And information are the conclusions and insights drawn from data after they've been processed. So if I say to you, if I say to Wits University after this meeting, the participants were pretty young, that is information. The participants at the last webinar were pretty young, that is information drawn from processed data. So things like mean and medians help you to make information. Statistics help you to make information from data. Data is low level and information is high level. I don't think you want to take the raw data to the VC or the dean or even the head of department. You know, that's why they employ data analysts and say, give me the information that's coming from the data. Data is pedestrian and information is strategic. So I thought I should draw that difference and also highlight that data is superior to expert opinions. or opinion. And this is why we need an institution. This is why we need to do measurements of our programs. Data is king. And for 6 years, one of the subjects I taught at the medical school was evidence-based medicine. And we have this pyramid of evidence where it's a global thing, not just at Wits. The pyramid is well known. Maybe many of you here know it. At the lowest level of that pyramid is expert opinion. And at the highest level is data. And of course, it also depends on the method you use to collect the data. While we agree that data is king, we must also question the way the data was collected. So data, the methods are king makers. And we say generally that data is the most important parameter for any organization. Think about the Formula One. What do you think makes a winner? What do you think makes a winner? What do you think gives the competitive advantage in Formula One? Is it the driver, Hamilton or Schumacher and the likes? Or is it the car, Mercedes, Ferrari and the likes? Or is it data? It will surprise you that what gives the competitive advantage, whether you win the Formula One or not, really depends on your use of data. When I say I mean the driver and the team behind the driver. In fact, the first two cannot do without the third. Both the driver and the car cannot do without data. The important questions that must be answered in real time in a Formula One race. What is the best time for a pit stop? What's the best time for the car to pull over and change the tires? What's the best, which team, which pit crew is the best? Which lap is the best for the car to stop at the pits and do some changes? What is the best fuel which fuel gives the best performance? Talking about fuel management is an entire field on its own in Formula One. At what speed should the car take bends based on the degree of the bend? And what choice of tires should be? So it's estimated that there are 3 terabytes of data a car sends in one race. And winners are decided by the quality of questions they ask and by the quality of data that are sent in real time and the quality of responses they get. Somebody sent a message. Okay. Now think about another organization. So if you really want to be on top, if your university wants to be on top, it has to use data more than just saying these students are doing well and these ones are not doing well. There are lots and lots of interventions that can be driven by data. And the last one I want to give to you is UPS. I think a year or two ago, their management sat down and said, let's put sensors in some of our vans. I think they have over 100,000 vans. I'm not sure if it's the United States or all over the world, the article I read, but they have hundreds of thousands of vans, if I remember, or about 100,000. They put sensors in 10,000 vans just to optimize, to try to measure and determine the shortest routes to distances and optimize their delivery routes. From that data-driven experiment, or from that experiment, the drivers were able to drive 20 million kilometers less in a year, saving 38 million liters of fuel, and obviously increased profits. And after that, I think they actually now order they advance to their own specification. So I think the best universities want to use data, whether we're talking about feeder schools, or where should our students be coming from, or we're talking about the students we already have, what kind of interventions work, and why do they work? And I think monitoring and evaluation is the beginning. At the moment, we're still just talking about counting and having data for what we are doing. But eventually, we'll have to then go into the science of what works and what doesn't work. And in fact, even go to the detail of contribution and the likes. Okay. So in a nutshell, you need a monitoring and evaluation system or plan for a university to monitor or evaluate its many activities. The monitoring and evaluation of its many activities, many activities. When you build an M&E plan for an organization like Wits or a country like South Africa, one of the struggles you would have is to make sure you don't have too many indicators. For South Africa, we capped our indicators at 102, and people want to bring a lot more indicators. And somebody said, look at Zimbabwe, they have 170 indicators. So, well, you can have a lot, but it's to use them that matter. So there are many intervention activities at Wits, and you would see the many indicators that came from those activities and outputs and the likes. But also, when you design an M&E plan, you are helping to guide program design, as well as resource allocation. For example, by looking at indicators, you know where there are fragmentation. By looking at activities and indicators, you know where there are fragmentations, where activities are not complete. You also know where there are duplications of activities, and you can then say, okay, to maximize our resources, let's do away with this and let's do away with the other one. But also, the science of data helps you in student development process. You may want to do good, but your good may not always translate to results. Let the data guide us. And you can then have an entire body of knowledge on the science of student development. Between 2012 and 2017, I was selected by the UK DFID as one of the 4-man panel to do monitoring and evaluation for a big program in an African country. And they spent about 10 million pounds, British pounds, on this project. And the project had brought in 10,000 girls and given them education, to try and reduce HIV and the likes. But after 5 years, the data and the science and the impact evaluation analysis showed that there were no positive results, Comparing these girls in your program to girls in some control areas, pre and post, we did not find a positive, we did not find significant results. And of course, the program implementers agreed. They were responsible for the data collection anyway, so they saw it. And it was very difficult for us to break that news, because if we say give that news to the DFID, the DFID, then people may lose their job, they close the program. But if we don't, money is being sunk down the line that's not having results. And then by interrogating the data a lot more, by looking into pockets of the data, we then dabbled into the question of what really changes a person, nature versus nurture. What really changes a student? Because it doesn't really help that you're spending all of these millions training young girls, but they are poor anyway, and their parents are poor, and their sugar daddies waiting for them outside of the program, and they will go back to reality. You meet with them once a week, you're spending millions, gifts, and all of that. And then the DFID then said, with all of these millions of pounds we have spent, if we had just built libraries and laboratories and built schools, would that have been more beneficial? And now we have to do a comparative cost-effective analysis. We had an economist in our team. So we're then able to draw out a theory of change for the development of students in that context. When I get a message from the chat, I do read it in case, okay. Yeah, so monitoring and evaluation helps you to determine how to run programs that benefit your students. I could give another example of an evaluation we're doing right now, but because of time, really, this evaluation is really mapping out the pathway for developing people in 5 African countries. So that's the value of an M&E plan. But at least at the beginning, let's just do some counting. Let's focus on monitoring at first. And eventually, as the university, like Fezile said, he said, this is a first attempt, you know, and with time, you can refine it and go into fine science. And also a monitoring and evaluation plan would help to identify, again, areas for improvement and opportunities for program optimization. This kind of proactive approach will give strategic direction to the program and also help in determining where the university should be going. Again, talking about resource allocation, it also doesn't make a lot of sense to spend 20 million rand or 100 million rand on a project, and you're reluctant to spend 2 million rand or 3 million rand on monitoring and evaluation. You know, you could get an M&E officer, you know, I don't know how much salary, maybe less than 1 million, and you get an assistant or something. You probably spend, you know, so if you're going to spend, people even say budget 10% of your program budget for monitoring and evaluation. So if you're going to run a program worth 100 million, at least you should have some 3 to 5 million to check if it's working. I want to pause there for 3 minutes. Please put in the chat box and tell me what you have learned so far. Talking about the Wits program now. Okay, I haven't fully gone into the Wits program, but just tell me what you've learned so far. I've talked about data and given examples of how some organizations have used data to optimize their performance and their results. I will wait to read. What have you learned so far? All right, we have a few submissions. Let's read just a few of them and go back to class. It's interesting to know the difference between data and information. Yeah, it's not just an academic piece of knowledge. It really is operational. Yeah, it's important to know if a program is working or not, exactly. The interplay between data and information. I've learned the difference between data, and I see a lot of people like data and information. I wish we had a training like this before developing plans, but no problem. You can always improve. Data is unbiased and M&E efforts are centralized, could save resources if duplication of efforts are spotted. Amazing stuff. Importance of data collection, really, an instance. I like parceling out of data. It seems like a lot of strategy about collecting more. All right, thank you. This symbiotic relationship. Yes, this is really symbiotic. It's really, really symbiotic in Elisa. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. Okay. So I want to show you what we did. I'll just show you the steps that we took in developing the M&E plan and what we did. And after that, I will show you the report. I'll scan through it. Yeah, so obviously the first thing we did was to understand the assignment. And we met with Wits University, it must have been 2-3 times, not less than twice. The first one, we thought we did understand it. The second time, yeah, we understood it. And then I think we had another meeting. We had a few meetings, basically, apart from getting lots of feedback from them on our deliverables. So I cannot overemphasize the need for consultations. It doesn't even make sense anyway for you to go and hide in one place in a silo and build an M&E plan. It doesn't make sense. You have to understand the different programs that you're building the M&E plan for, the different interventions. It might be one big program with different interventions, or it might be multiple programs, different departments, different units doing their own thing. It's always good to sit with these guys and understand that. Then after understanding the assignment, so what we got from Wits is the scope of work and what the aim and the objective, what they want us to do. After that, they sent us lots of documents to review. As you can imagine, it's an established university and there are SOPs and reports and all of these things in different units. It's not like going to sit with one HIV program in Limpopo. You can probably do that and build an M&E plan there in 2 weeks. But this one is a big university, many stakeholders. So we read many documents and synthesized, as you'll see very soon, our understanding of their program. Then after that, we had key informant interviews with many stakeholders, I think about 50 of them. And you can imagine how, that will take some time. It's not quantitative data. These people are telling you stories. Some of them you get correctly or you think you understand, and you have to go back, and some you don't really understand. You have to go back. And you then go back and do your data analysis and, the way you analyze qualitative data, and listen again and check what you're getting. Then after that, you then email them to say, hey, these are the narrative you said. This is the narrative I got about what your unit is doing. You see some of those units or interventions. This is the narrative I got. Is this correct? And from this narrative, these are the indicators we want to create. Do you agree with these indicators? And it's always nice when they say, oh yes, we agree with these indicators. But we even have some of these indicators already, even though we don't report them. We know, for example, number of students who came for a leadership workshop. We know that. Number of meals supplied per day. We know that. So we already have these indicators. So it makes our lives easier. But there are places where we're creating indicators afresh and they never existed. And you want to be sure that the stakeholder understands what you're saying. So after the email validation, and we then had a validation workshop in August. Was it November or December last year? I think it was November, where we all sat in a room to look at the plan. Again, not everyone will be there, but the turnout was very good. Again, this is really emphasizing the stakeholder engagement and consultation that's needed when building an M&E plan. If you want me to do regression for you, I will do it for you, and I don't need anybody. I could even be prescriptive and say, this is what you should do. But when you're building an M&E plan, you do not want to be prescriptive. You want to carry the people along. And so we had a validation workshop that was pretty well attended. And even after that, we still had some follow-up meetings. I have here email validation again, but I should also be adding Zoom meetings, consultations before and after the workshop. So that means that this process took us 6 to 9 months to do, but also just because there's 1 or 2 months of, holiday, December, registration in January, February, orientation, and the likes. So a university-wide M&E plan should take you about 6 months to build if you eliminate the other factors. And it's exactly when we built one for South Africa, it also took us 6 to 9 months. And so this is the standard. But if I'm building an M&E plan for a small one organization, could be a month, 3 months, 1 to 3 months. Okay, it's just so you understand what it takes. So what did we do? So the first thing we did was to write a section on program description. I'm going to show you the M&E plan now. You see a section on program description, okay? And that is the section where we summarize the different interventions in the program. It's not even called a program, it's called a framework because there are many programs there. The Wits Institutional Framework for Student Success. We did a description of it. And here we are trying to describe in a few pages or 5 pages what this huge framework is about. So you can imagine we'll have to send and get feedback, send and get feedback. Even people that sometimes work in the program may say something different from what's documented on the Wits website or other Wits documents. So that program description is really important that you understand what the program is about before you go about developing indicators, right? And after that section, we then go on to the program theory of change, a bit similar to M&E framework, how the program aims to achieve its developmental objectives and contribute to student success. Hey, you in campus security, how are you contributing to student success? We're here for the students. And you in the library, how are you contributing to student success? And you who is, of course, we don't put it like that, right? And the unit responsible for gardening and leadership skills and food and all of these different interventions, we have to think through how they hope to contribute to the overall goal. It's exactly what you did in that breakaway session, except that this time, more detail, more work. Okay. And after we come up with the theory of change, we develop the M&E framework, which Wits, an M&E officer can run with this and look at the different indicators and say to the different departments, different units, and we need you to submit your data once a year or twice a year and chase after them. Say, hey, you haven't submitted your data. Our report is due, let's assume in November. All data must come in by August. But in a digital age, maybe the data can be submitted electronically, or there can be a central repository, a central software platform where you can pull out many of those data. Yeah, so that person would have to then, collect the statistics. They don't have to compute it. They don't collect the data. They just collect the statistics from the different units in the M&E framework and report on them. And with time, they might even say, this indicator is not very useful. Let's remove it. Let's add another one, or they are very, there are many, let's reduce the number. So it's not it's a live document that can be modified, the M&E framework and the M&E plan. But we recommend that when you're modifying it, it shouldn't be one person alone. There should be like a panel, maybe once a year, once in 2 years. I don't think it should be one person who feels that indicator should not be there, just removing it. And maybe the person doesn't fully appreciate or understand the indicator. So it's always good to use consultations to update M&E framework. And of course, we then specify the M&E systems we think are necessary. All right, I want to give you a breakaway session, but not now. Allow me quickly show you the M&E plan and the M&E framework. So this is the monitoring and evaluation plan for the Wits institutional framework for student success. And you have a glossary of terms. And then we'll provide an introduction to the document, the different sections in the document, what the document is about, the different sections in the document. And we started by asking, why should a university need an M&E plan? Purpose of the plan, some of which I've already told you about. And these are the steps we took in developing the plan. Let me make this slightly bigger, I think. These are the steps we took in developing the plan. We had a validation workshop that was well attended. And the intended audience of the M&E plan we specified, but obviously this specification is coming from Wits, not from us. They know their structure and who should be doing what. And this is where you start from when you build any M&E plan. It's always good to start from a summary of the program, you know. And if you look at the Wits institutional framework for student success, you know, the student is at the center of it, and you find a cluster of interventions around focusing on academic support. And you have another cluster for health and wellness. You have another cluster for material needs and personal development. So let's just take a few examples. For material needs, you have food, funding, accommodation, very, very important. International students, logistics, safety that I've talked about earlier. Let's look at personal development, you know, work experience, life skills, leadership and skills development, you know, and of course, health, you know, so there's counseling, medical support, and the likes. So there are 4 main clusters of interventions with many, many activities to support student development at Wits. And for me, I think some of these work have also inspired me to know the extent to which Wits goes to support the student to succeed. I mean, in comparison to some other context. Of course, Wits would want to continue to improve. That's not to say there's no room for improvement, but it's very inspiring, given where some of us have done our undergraduate studies. Okay, and then we start to describe the different thematic areas, those cluster of activities. We call each of them a thematic area. And so you have academic support as the first thematic area, health and wellness. You can imagine how many times we wrote this. You have to read and listen to the interviews. And then you go to material needs, and then in the conclusion to say, hey, this is not a static document. It can be updated. We then come up with a theory of change. And so this is the theory of change that we've come up with. And the theory of change is that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. And we all know what that problem is. It's student success. However you look at it, whether you're looking at retention or throughput. Yeah. And so what should we do? Wits pumps in money and resources into this program. So that's inputs into this program that has 4 thematic areas. And you can see the thematic areas. And we have managed to capture what each thematic area entails with one or two sentences or even phrases here and there. Yeah, I mean, it can always be improved, but we believe we've captured the most. I mean, and Wits has reviewed this as well. So, and these are the outputs from the different programs, and these are the outcomes. Okay, the output, like you all know, is easy. You know, the outcomes is where some people struggle. You go back. The outcome is the developmental objective that program aims to achieve. The life, what you want to change in the beneficiary. You can't think about outcome and not think about the beneficiary for a program that has to do with people. You know, so if you're supplying food, you're trying to reduce food security. If you're running leadership workshops, you hope that the students acquire leadership skills and they're better at leadership skills. If you're teaching research skills or literacy skills or learning skills, you hope that these improve as well. It's not yet time for academic success. It's by achieving these outcomes, then you can achieve academic success. However you want to measure student success, sorry, not academic. However you want to measure student success, then it has to come from here. If students do not have good work-life balance, like one of the presenters said, if they're alienated, you know, if they cannot lead themselves, they don't know when to wake up and go to the library, if their mental health is suffering because of pressures and other things, then this is going to suffer. So the person in each of these units should be able to say, I'm contributing to student success by providing something, and this something is doing this in the students. You know, it's not just a black box. The box can be opened. You're providing food. What does food do to students that can make them achieve academic success? What does it do to students? That's the outcome, the immediate results, the short-term results in the beneficiaries. Okay, before the goal. The goal is really academic success. Yeah, so I continue. And these are the number of indicators we developed. Like I said, it's usually a funnel. The impact is 5 indicators, outcomes are 15. And from the different thematic areas, we had about 20 to 25 indicators from the different thematic areas. That's about 80 something there. But anyway, altogether it's 111. And Wits is very, very particular about data governance. So they sent us all of this section on data governance and data quality as well. So there's a data quality framework on their data flow. And of course, you shouldn't write an M&E. Data quality governance and data quality and data governance are significant components of monitoring and evaluation plan, especially data quality. But you shouldn't even talk about data quality without data governance anyway. So, because M&E is really about data, really following the data. What is the data saying? Garbage in, garbage out. If the data is not accurate, then, you know, your decisions will not be accurate. And of course, lastly, we specify M&E reporting, the kind of reporting that should be done, and and the frequency of reporting. And these days, we have dashboards. You can use Power BI or even enterprise software to build dashboards. And I know that at least my interaction from Wits, they can pull out data on many indicators very readily. They have dashboard that they already have, you know, data science unit. But the M&E person can also have dashboard to see how now the lower indicators flow into those student success indicators. You know, instead of, lots of organizations don't use papers these days. So I'll stop there and quickly show you in 5 minutes. Spreadsheet, where is it? Yep, the M&E framework, the M&E framework. That was the M&E plan I showed to you. The 111 indicators we cannot put in a document, right? So these are, if you look at the labeling here, this is impact. I want to go from impact to outputs. These are 5 impact indicators, 6 rows. Oh yeah, 1 heading, 5 impact indicators, as you saw there. And the aspect of impact the indicators are measuring. The first 4 are measuring student success. The 5th one is measuring employability. And what are you measuring under employability? Employability rates. You have a definition, specify your numerator, specify your denominator. If you're doing M&E, it's good to have an eye for statistics. It's good to know some of these things. Okay, maybe what I should be doing is hiding some of this. Okay, so yeah, you specify your numerator and denominator, but for the student success, you're different in measures of academic success, retention rate, success rate, throughput rate, and so on and so forth. And the outcome indicators are there, which I showed you. And then there's a lot of interventions on personal development. And we have a lot of indicators there, material needs, and lots of indicators there, whether we're talking about accommodation, funding. We really had a struggle to cut off a few. Wits can add more with time or even reduce more. Okay, I think I should stop there now. And I do not know how ready you are to go into another breakaway session, but let's just do it for 15, 20 minutes before we close. Before I send you to your different rooms, do you have any questions, please? All right, no question is forthcoming. Breakaway rooms, please. I will show that slide again. Please take a picture of it. Please take a picture of it. Take a picture of this slide. Where is it? Similar to what you've done, but this time I've just said, let's look at, Ashton has a question.
Yes, I've got a question. Sorry, I want to know, what is the link between your M&E plan and your M&E plan for your strategic plan? Because having had a look at it, a lot of those indicators in that I would assume would actually sit in a strategic plan, and the monitoring and evaluation that is linked to a strategic plan with the reporting that would happen in your annual reports and your annual performance plan and that. So I'm not quite sure whether this is a standalone, is it duplicating? If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. There's a section in the report where we wrote on the alignment between the Wits institutional framework for student success and the Wits strategic plan. So if you pick the M&E plan, you see a section where we said both the Wits strategic plan and this one, they do align. And many of the indicators, the impact indicators for the Wits student success program, they are in the strategic plan. But maybe we had this discussion before. Maybe we can still sit and see how they align, how they are named in the strategic plan.
But then how do you engage with your staff around that? Because, I mean, is this now creating additional things for them to collect? Are they seeing it as more work if they're not paying attention to the monitoring and evaluation that's linked to a strategic plan? How does this then complement, or is it? Yeah.
So I think Fezile will be the best to answer that. I know that an M&E unit is being created, or will be, maybe not a unit, an M&E position will be created, and within an existing unit at Wits, And so it's really not more work. The person will, yeah, it's more work and a new person. The person will be responsible for driving this program, and maybe more work for the people in the different units and thematic areas where they have not been previously reporting. They will now be required to report. But again, the indicators, the people in the different thematic areas report, and it's not a lot. It becomes a lot when you aggregate them. In each thematic areas, you might report 4 or 5 indicators. So it's a bit more work, but I know that somebody will come in and be responsible for the M&E of the student success framework. If I haven't answered your question correctly, maybe Fezile can help.
Sorry, kind of then linked to that, how do you get the staff buy-in?
Yeah, I will handle. You see, I'm a consultant.
Okay.
Fezile will answer that. Yeah, yeah. These are very important questions. I don't want to go beyond my pay grade.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Any other comments? People have, the numbers reduced from 70 to 62. Is it the breakaway room that's chasing people? Okay, let's do it quickly, guys. Take a picture of this, please. Take a picture of this. It's similar to what you've done, but this time I just want you to think institutionally. Think of 3 interventions. 3 interventions.
Excuse me, White, can this also be put on the chat? It's a lot easier to get access to it than take a picture.
Okay, I will do that now. All right, I'll break. Should I do that before? Let me do that before I create the breakout room. Problems. That's part 2. Just a minute. All right, I have sent it. You should get it in 30 seconds. Yeah, it's now in the chat. I will open the rooms again. It's probably just 15 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes to wrap up.
Do me, let's give it a try. Good afternoon, colleagues.
What group is that, please?
All right. let me share. I'm not sure what group we are. What group are we?
That's group 4 to me. That's group 4.
All right.
You may share, please.
Just trying to share. Yes. Not sharing it. Sharing. Yes. Over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, we met and looked at the questions and tried to respond to them. The first question was saying, do you think university need an M&E plan for their intervention? And the answer was in the positive. We said yes. It is necessary that institution of higher learning have this plan in place. And then the second question was saying list 3 interventions in your university to improve student success. We named about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got tutorial support services, we've got peer collaborative learning, academic literacy, peer academic mentoring, supplemental instruction, food program, student first year experience program, student retention unit to support priority students, writing center. Priority student is another name for at-risk students. And then that question, the next question was, for each intervention, list 2 output indicators. And then we identified this: 1, graduations, and we said there should be a higher throughput or pass rate. And then it was followed by, for each intervention, list 1 outcome indicator. 1 outcome indicator was professional development, improve health and well-being. And then I think the last one was list overall impact of indicators for the 3 interventions. We said employability, success in entrepreneurship, reduce poverty, contribution to the economy. And that's our story. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Benny. Please do not
Yeah.
do not close yet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Those are very nice interventions, or good, not nice. Good interventions to start with. I like the outcome indicators. I like them. But I just wanted to ask you, give just one comment. Do you think output leads to outcome, or do you think outcome leads to output?
Output leads to outcome, or vice versa?
Yes, I'm asking which one you think.
Output leads to outcome.
Great. So do you think graduation should come before professional development and well-being and improved health? Do you think people graduate and then
then they develop? They develop after that, because you come fresh from school, and when you enter the work field, you start developing as a professional.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. But that is, I don't think that's part of your area of interest in you. Yeah. When you said professional development, I thought you were talking about maybe leadership skills, life skills, those kind of skills that help students to organize themselves and think better. The point I'm trying to make is, don't you think that when you run these interventions, students gain professional development, let's call it leadership development, and improved health and well-being, and because of these, they will then do better academically? Should it not be so? My point is, should graduation not come after your outcome indicators?
In fact, you are right, because we debated that just before we finished.
Okay.
We debated that to say does it not come right at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, we debated about that. I think my team members can assist in here.
No problem. It's a 20-minute exercise.
Okay, okay.
Even when you have a month
Yeah.
or 2 months, you will still be debating.
Okay.
Now and then. Yeah, debates.
Okay.
Mantipeni, please stop sharing.
Okay, yeah. To me.
Who is taking over and wrapping up with a vote of thanks? I can do that.
Sorry, before you do that, may I encourage everyone to complete the short evaluation. It's only 6 questions, 4 of which are multiple choice questions. The link has been pasted in the chat space. Thank you very much.
Brimo, I can do the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Fezile.
Colleagues, thank you, firstly, Brimo and Caesar, for the very informative workshop. Thank you, colleagues, for participating and interacting in the sessions and contributing to the breakaway discussions. And like Brimo said, getting upskilled on M&E principles is something that takes longer than just a few hours. It would be a few days or even a few weeks of intensive workshopping. But I do hope that from this workshop, you got a good introduction that gives everybody an appreciation of the value of M&E, some foundational consideration, and the systematic approach of developing an M&E plan. And for the Wits example, that brings it, I think, the case study brings it closer to home because this is a space and the context that we all work within. I saw a question about sharing that document. We cannot share the Wits document just yet, but at some point you will see it floating around within the Siyaphumelela network. As I mentioned, the M&E is our core focus for Siyaphumelela 3. So over the next 3 years, you'll be hearing a lot on our M&E process, our progress, and getting many updates on how we are implementing this plan at Wits, together with all our challenges and all our wins. So thank you so much for joining the workshop and sticking through all 4 hours. Like Ephraim said, Ashton has shared the link. I encourage you to click the link now and evaluate. It really helps in refining our offerings and making sure that future workshops are high quality and very, very useful. Thank you, colleagues. If there's nothing else, Ashton?
Sorry,
No,
no.
that's Thank you very much to Wits for organizing this workshop. We really appreciate it. It is the first of our service workshops and capacity development programs for Siyaphumelela, Siyaphumelela 3. But we'll be in touch with everybody. I'll share the links for the presentations with everyone and the recording. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And thank you for Wits for hosting us.
Thank you all.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you and
Bye.
goodbye.
Sorry, there was a mention of a certificate. I didn't hear anything, anyone comment about it.